What's that, Charmander? You learned a new move? Try it out for me, buddy. Has this ever happened to you? Your little fledgling starter learns a move that you think is a bit too powerful for its tiny body? No? Well, okay then. Carry on. Alright, what is up, ghouls, gamers, and goblins? PotatoBagel here. This video is going to be a little weird. Also because there's no actual make. It's not a tier list, no argument. It's just answering a question. But what is that question? Basically, it's how much does something like Flamethrower actually matter? And I mean this from the single player experience. If you pick the fire starter, basically guaranteed to have Ember early. By the time you evolve into your middle form, you're gonna get one of three moves, Flame Charge, Fire Fang, or Flame Wheel, which are all around 60 base power. And then by your final evolution, at least before level 50, you're gonna get Flamethrower, which is 95 power. And compared to Ember's 40 base power, that's almost 2.5 times as powerful. And so the question is that extra power necessary? So does it actually matter? And how would we know? Well, it's simple. We just got to do math. I mean, luckily the damage formulas are easily found and the calculator known, and so all we have to do is just put it all together. All right. So what I have here is the damage calculator as part of Pokemon Showdown. And for this example, I have Rowlet because all of its, all the grass moves it learns, are, physical. So it's just easy for me to jump right into its physical attack. And then I chose Glalie because I needed something, and I just needed something, decent as basically a test dummy. So it has 80 and everything. It's grass is neutral on ice. It does decent HP. And what I wanted to do was sort of set up a comparison to see how these moves, perform as you level up. And so the biggest thing to take into account here is I purposefully set Glalie's defense to be the same as Rowlet's attack. And the reason for that is on screen somewhere I'll probably have the damage formula, is that the attack and defense are a ratio. And I basically wanted to set that ratio to 1. That as sort of a control, because what we want is to see the comparison of the moves and their power versus how they level up. So that is all that we're taking into account. So as you can see here with Leafage, at level 5, all Rowlet's going to have is Leafage. Does anywhere between 26 and 30% of its damage. As you can see, it's all 6, aside from the max roll 7. And so what happens is when we level up to level 6, both of them being level 6 to keep that's the same, is that the percentage changed, but the damage didn't. And that is what I wanted to talk about, is that the HP always scales up, but your damage does not. And so then the question is, when does your damage go up? And what I've found is that, again, at level 7, it's 6 and 7, that it happens at 8. When you start at level 5, the next time you're going to get a specific damage increase is at level 8. And the reason for that is that level portion of the damage formula. That level portion says 2 times level over 5. Basically meaning every 2.5 levels, we're going to get an actual like increment of your damage is going to increase by 1. And so because you can't basically get to level 2.5, that's not a thing, it's either 2 or 3. What's going to happen is at 3, 5, and 8, you are guaranteed to get a damage up, a +1 for damage. That much is obvious. However, at level 10, specifically level 10, I just don't mean anything ending in. I mean at level 10, I can go to level 10 here. And you will see that it's still 7 and 9 like it was at level 8. There is a 4th break, but it's never in the same spot. And that is a very weird thing. So basically, there are like 4 breaks in your damage because you are increasing your damage every 2.5 levels, like per 10 levels. So 10 over 2.5 would be 4, so there would be 4 breaks, 3 of which are guaranteed at anything ending in 3, 5, and 8. 4th one is just may or may not be at the 0. It may happen early. You may actually end up having your damage stay the same at like 23 and 25. And then it goes up at, because it went up at 20, and it's going to go up again at 28, then 30. Something like that. Meanwhile, your HP is guaranteed to go up per level as part of your HP formula. That's, do we want Gen 3 on? Yeah. As you can see right here, you have a base HP of 10 that increases per level plus the actual, stat calculation based on your base stat, IVs, EVs, and whatever. So outside of this, you're guaranteed a +1 to your HP every time you level up. Meanwhile, every other stat, not so much, as you only have a base +5, and everything is then derived from your actual base stats and any modifiers. Damage formula, here we go. Most recent one, Gen 5 onward. Yeah, we're not looking at. Oh yeah, Gen 5 onward. As you can see, this part right here is what we want to look at. This little part. Right here. Anything past this parentheses is stuff you would naturally take into account, crit, stab, type effectiveness, whether or not you burned, anything like that. What matters here is you have the 2 times level over 5. Alright. So I have the stat calculator from Wikipedia. And what it says is that, for HP, you have your actual stat calculation based on your base stat IBC and the level modifier with the base of 10. But HP also has a direct additive level multiplier guaranteeing that you will get another +1 every time you up. The other stats don't have that. So you are guaranteed basically a +1 to your HP every level. In the damage calculator, this is the part that we're looking at. There is no direct level, additive. Instead, the level only just takes into this part right here. 2 times level +2. Basically meaning that about like every 3 levels or so, you're only going to get a plus. I mean, I have it right here. So if we would go to level 1, if you have a move that's base 40 power, assuming that you have the exact same attack and defense, it would do 1 damage. And then at level 3, or sorry, that does 3 damage. And then at level 3, it bumps up to 4. At 5, it goes up to 5. It jumps up again at 7.5. Obviously, that's not really a level. So at 8. And then it stays the same at 10, jump 5 or 13. Let me see if I can. So as you can see, between every 10 jumps up, you're starting here 3 times. I zoom out a bit. 3 to 4 times. Right across this set of 10. Fourth. So about like 3 to 4 times, get a standard +1 increase your damage. That is to your damage based on your level. Now again, doing these numbers based on the assumption that you have the exact same attack to defense ratio. Obviously, that's really where all the fluctuation is in this attack to defense ratio. The reason I wanted to keep this same is so we can look at how the power of the move changes, or based on the power of the move, how the damage changes. And so that's why I have it set up like this with Ridge Razor, Leaf Blade against a standard target. So if I set these level 5, that is around the time you get Leafage. I mean, maybe like 9 at the latest, depending on what game you're playing. But still, let's assume level 5, it's your starting stab move. This does anywhere between 26 to 30%. Obviously 6 or 7 damage. If I bump us up to level 6, it now does 24 to 28%. Still the same 6 or 7 damage. Obviously, our damage is to level 8, assuming we're both level 8. Again, the attack to defense ratio to then 7 and 9. As you can see, at that point, the damage decreased a little. I mean, it still does around 30%. It goes up 13, as we just, where it now does 7, 9, and then 10. And then see, at this point, by 13, we've dropped from doing 26 to 30% to now doing 16 to 23% by 13. Then go 15. 9, 10, and 12 damage, 18 to 24%. Obviously, I think the percentage is going to fluctuate a little bit more because it's earlier levels. And our damage is, the low damage is increasing by about 1 every time, while the high is increasing by about 2. So, but it's still steadily decreasing. 17 to 23, doing 10 to 13 damage. And then it was going to increase again at 20. And now we're doing 19.4%. But hey, look at that. Razor Leaf here is doing 25.8 to 30.6%. That is the exact, roughly the exact same percentage that Leafage was doing at level 5. It's nice. It shows that, at level 20, Razor Leaf is capable of picking up the slack that Leafage is now starting to show. So that serves as a point for at least the natural upgrade. That's what we want. That's what we wanted to prove. Is going from Leafage to Razor Leaf worth it? However, Leafage, among the mid-tier move, second stage starter, is among the weakest because it's base 55 power. I believe on the higher end is something like Charmeleon with Fire Fang. Fire Fang is 65 power. But what if Razor Leaf was 65 power? all of a sudden it's obviously still doing a bit more damage. But at what point would razor leaf then get to the point still doing that 26 to 30%? Let's just go up another 10 levels just to see. Well, I mean, it's 28 to 34. It's still a little bit higher. 27 to 32. Okay, we're getting there. Seems a little bit extreme. 26 to 32. So we've kind of hit the low end. High end is a little bit 70. 26 to 31.7. Okay, but now we're at level 100. And at best, this is still doing 31% as opposed to 30%. And we're already at level 1. And we still have another move to use after this. Like, how does this make sense? Don't get me wrong. It should make sense that it should do more damage, but I mean, the damage fall off of leafage was pretty extreme to go from 5 to 20 and then immediately just get that next move. And then now if the move was base 65 power, we're set to at least, maintain our damage somewhat all the way through the rest of the game, like even beyond the rest of the game. And then we have another move that's base like 95 power after this. Like, how do we scale this? You know? Like at what like this is 65. Oh, it kind of okay. But yeah, see, it needs to be 62 base power in order for it. Like, if we put this back to like 40 base power, it's now dropped down to about 20%. About 20%. 62 is where it hits around the 30 mark, and then if you still have a move that's base 90 power, you start going to do 40%. Like, well beyond, like 36 to 40%. Like, how do you like it's overkill, to be honest. If you're doing about 30%, 26 to 30%, guarantee the 4-hit KO, starter fight. And then you go through the end of the game and like these battles are a lot more volatile now. I don't know, because just doing so much more damage. Like, I just don't know how to elaborate on this. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves here. You have a move that's base 40 power, and you upgrade it at a point where it makes sense for it to start doing 30% again. Maybe a little bit on top of, because it's a power boost from evolving as well. But then that just can get you through the rest of the game. Like, and then you go from around like 50, 60 power to then 90. Like that's a lot more damage. So how I don't want to say there's like nothing to fix here, because obviously it just works. And I'm talking about this from the single player perspective. Because for like a while, what were those locks called? Like, they were like power locks or something, right? Where it was still a standard Nuzlocke run, but you can only that were like below 60 base power. Like, that's not hard to do. Sure, you're going to take a lot more damage from the more powerful moves, but I mean, you could relatively maintain your damage output for the rest of the game with something like And so it's weird that not only is there another like basic upgrade, leafage to razor leaf to then leaf blade at 90 base power, but there's also moves that happen like after that. Flamethrower has fire blast, that type of thing. That's like over 100 base power. Like it's 120. And you're already doing this much damage. And I feel like that sense of scaling isn't preserved that well. How would you like set these up to for those, I don't want to say breakpoints. Breakpoints doesn't feel like the right word, but I guess it would be breakpoints to maintain and then slightly, increase that damage output. Well, luckily I have something. Because if we were to take leafage and bring that down to 30, remember at one point tackle was 35 base power. So I think if something like tackle, pound, scratch were to be 35 base power, and then your basic stab move were to be 30 base power, obviously with stab, that 30 base power is an effective 45. So you'd do 30, and then if I were to say this to be 55, and then this to be 70, leaf blade was 170. Just see what happens. Okay. Well, as you can see, we're doing around 26% max at level 5 with, a 30 base power move with stab. Okay. We go to level 20. That was what we said was a decent upgrade point. All of a sudden, we're now doing, 26 to 30. Back to 5 for a moment. So 26 was our lowest. 26 is the max here. And we have, a range of about 5% HP. That works. Can we do? Now, obviously, here Leaf Blade is already doing, that 36% max at base 70. So if we were to go to 35, that 15 levels here, bare minimum is doing around 30%, going up to roughly 36%. That's a decent range, a decent upgrade. Okay, let's come up with another move. It doesn't matter. Not really. I can make this physical, grass. I can make this now 85. And then if I would go to 50, again, what we're looking for is something around slightly above 36% at 50. Okay, we're doing 35, we're now doing 41%. Well, that's actually not too bad, all things considered. Because 50 is the level most VGC matches are, taking place at. If I were to this is, Leaf Blade was 90. That's a 1 to 2%, you know, increase to something, relatively solid there. And it leaves, more room. It's 85. It leaves more room for there to be final move at 100 base power. And it's better scaling, I guess. I think that's sort of what I've learned from, doing this and showing this is that a lot of these moves have really high base power for like no reason. Sure, the early game is going to be a bit more annoying because you're going from 40 base power to then 30 base power, and that really bites. But like the mid game's still going to be relatively the same, and because the damage fall off isn't as high in the late game, having a slightly weaker move doesn't really make that much of a difference. But it still feels like the idea of that upgrade, you know, now then makes more sense because now we have numbers that show, well, not only is it doing around the same, you know, bare minimum, the same max damage that the pre was, but it still has, it's doing a little bit more. Like we went from, yeah, we went from, okay, 26% to then at level 20, 30%, 35, to around 35, 36%. And then at 50, this max is now 41%. So every 15 levels, we've created a move that's able to have a, you know, marginal damage increase of about 5%. Obviously, keep in mind there's something with base 80 HP. If it has less HP, I would still, if it has less HP, I would assume the differential would come. If you're at 50, thinking out loud here, that's 58. So, okay, somehow that works out even better. Level 5, like 30, 35, 45, 50. Okay. Doing 30% at level 20. You're doing slightly above 30%. 32 to now 38. 35. Okay, doing about 37.5 to 45%. Then at 50, you're doing 44.5 to slightly above 50%. Now, the thing to obviously point out here, if I were to do something like Digimon, has less base HP than a Glalie. And okay, I wanted to see the HP for a second because obviously there's a lot of things out here that have ridiculously high HP. So obviously, like the higher the HP, like 15 to 23, 21 to 25, 20. So it was 23, or yeah, 21 to 25. Okay, not the best. 6 to 32, 36. So obviously, like the HP is making a huge difference there, but you could still see like that same relative, increase based on the move's power simply by starting lower and trying to maintain it within a 100-point range. Basically, it's going from 30 to 85. Like that's still really solid. You know, and it's just very interesting that the moves don't do that, and instead they're increasing in such a way where it's like drastically increased damage. Like there's no compensation as I just made with this, and I don't know. It's just something like I had asked myself one day, like, could I run through the game with just Ember? Like, is Flamethrower actually needed or worth it? And like, sure, in the long run, it's you know slightly more damage comparatively, but like it's still a little overkill compared to using something like obviously just using, something like Ember, yeah, it's gonna fall off really hard. But upgrading to, the mid-tier move, like something like Flame Wheel, like that's like max 14%, not even. Like Razor Leaf, bare minimum from 30 to 55. Like this is vanilla Razor Leaf versus if I were to set this back to 40. 17, like this is a much better improvement. Like that's going from base 40 to 55. Like that's so much, like that makes a huge difference, in the late game. And it starts and it but it feels nice even in the early mid game when you do get it, and then you just have, and then you are like 70 base power move, and then the placeholder here with absorb being set it to base 85. Like this is just weaker than Leaf Blade, and you can already see it's like basically a 50% increase at level 50. And it's, in my mind, this comes across as unnecessary. Obviously, just my opinion. Well, I shouldn't say unnecessary because this is the number that it just used, but it would naturally be higher because something like Flamethrower is 95 power. I set this to 95. Like that's 33 to 40% at level 50. This would technically do more had this been a Decidueye in an actual normal Glalie. Glalie, base 80 defense, Decidueye with base 107. Like, this would still do more because the ratio is in favor of Decidueye's attack over Glalie's defense. So this would do more, and this is just a dummy, and it's already doing 40%. One move, with stab, neutral, setup. Like, I don't. In my mind, that just feels like it's a bit much. Because like here's what like Leaf Blade here is set to 70. In a move like Volt Switch and U-Turn, I'm pretty sure are both 70 base power. Those are tech moves. Those are tech moves, and they're doing a ridiculous amount of damage. Still, like at the high end over double, the low end just slightly better, and it's so weird. I don't know. It's like this isn't a point of me to try and like prove something, but it's just one of those things where it's just weird. I don't know. Like it's a thing that just makes you like scratch your head and just go, huh? Because like it works. I mean, don't get me wrong. This just somehow works, given that competitive Pokemon is popular. And like obviously, when I pull the damage for me, because I left the A over D here to be like super. But I left this to be 1. I left this as a control. Meanwhile, other part here, this 2 times level over 5. This is what we were messing with the power and the power. So we have 2 times level, like this is what we kept. But if you do damage calcs for something like VGC, what typically happens is the level is going to be the exact same. And sometimes you play around with the power of the move because sometimes you don't know whether or not you want to run. I think a good example is something like Brick Break over Close Combat. Like obviously Close Combat has a huge drawback because of lower defenses. Brain Punch, which is solid damage. And then like you mess with A over D because you're messing with your EVs and IVs to try and like hit those breakpoints. So it's almost like the exact opposite of what I just did because there's a lot more in control. Meanwhile, from a single player experience, you're leveling up, you're getting better moves, and I just wanted to see how much that actually mattered in the long run. And it's so much more overkill. And overkill still feels too, because by the point that you do get flamethrower at like the late 30s, early 40s, like at that point, that is overkill. And it doesn't really start falling off until you like just hit level 100 and it's just doing slightly better than your other moves did when you got those. But you have every other level before that to see how much like that matters. But the reason it doesn't matter is because everything is also at that point. You know, it's like it's not just like you just get flamethrower, it's every other fire type is gonna have flame or flare blitz or fire blast or something. So it balances out because it's a universal scale, you know, it's the same move across multiple Pokemon. But it's also like from the player's perspective, it's a massive upgrade. And it's so weird. You know, I really like these damage formulas, but the power of the move is so like upscaled for no reason. Like we have Constrict as a move, that is 15 base power. And that could be so much more viable if every other move, at least early on, was closer to that level. And so that really is my only criticism out of this is realizing just how upscaled these moves are. You know, like the earlier moves, not so much. They go from 40 to 30, but like anything that is above 100 really needs to like be reset a little. But I don't know. That's just me. And I thought this was fascinating. I thought it was fun making this. I wanted to talk about it, really showcase it because I had the question and I wanted it answered. And so just leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think, what you thought out about, because there's a lot to take away from this. I think. I don't know. I just want this to be a really interesting discussion point. So a little haphazard, a little unprofessional, not as like well thought out. But just leave a comment. Let me know you guys want to talk about, and while you're there, just like and subscribe. Yeah, and as always, stay frothy.